Again, good evening. My name is Doug Hewitt, and I'm the city manager, and I'd like to thank you all for coming out tonight so that we can share some information with you about some of our dams that we have which were breached as part of Hurricane Matthew. It seems very difficult to believe, but it was October 8th when we went through Hurricane Matthew together as a community. And looking around the room, I've had the great pleasure of meeting some of you, working with some of you as well. Mr. Rivera, there we are right here, and as well as some of the other people from the Rayconda neighborhood who worked with us not only on issues related to the dam, but also on the road. And I see a couple of other familiar faces as well from our friends at Arran Lakes and other places as well. So again, thank you all for taking the time tonight to come out. I'd also like to take this time as well to thank Councilmember Bill Crisp, who's here down front with us. But I also want to thank you for your patience. As I said, it has only been October 8th since Hurricane Matthew so devastated eastern North Carolina, in particular Fayetteville and Cumberland County. But I thank you for your patience because it has taken us some time, as you can tell, for us to be at a point when we had information that we could share about not only how we could replace what we are seeing as some of our public facilities, but also try to develop a process that we could roll out to maybe assist some of the neighborhoods affected, such as the ones which are here, with your private facilities as well. And the private facilities are Arran Lakes and Rayconda as well. But again, we do know that it has been quite a bit of time since October 8th. But we have steadily made progress, whether or not it has been in helping people remove debris from their yards and their homes, whether or not it's applying for a variety of grants, from Golden Leaf all the way to securing funding with others from the state, or working closely with FEMA to try to bring immediate relief to some of the families who were displaced because they were displaced from their homes during the hurricane. It has taken us some time to get out here, and I do want to acknowledge that. But what we have tonight is we have with us our friends Charles Archer with Friesen Nichols, who we've hired as our project managers to help us navigate this process of re-impounding our dams, the public ones, as well as to help us identify a process that we want to roll out tonight that we believe may also provide some relief to help with some of the issues with the private facilities or private dams as well. We will have, I know that you were coming in, that they were passing out cards. If you, with questions, as we go along tonight, if you have any additional questions that you'd like to have answered, I guess we're asking folks to raise their hands, and we'll come along and collect those as well. But again, thank you all for coming out, and we look forward to sharing some information with you, as well as trying to answer some of the questions that you have as well. Thank you. So with that, I'll introduce Charles Archer from Friesen Nichols.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out and sharing your Monday evening with us. We really do appreciate it. I'm going to just advance the slides here. It's the slide we used on we did these meetings last Tuesday and Thursday night of last week. But this map shows the city of Fayetteville, and all those little red dots represents dams that are in the city of Fayetteville. And there are about 55 dams, I believe is the number. 45 of those are privately owned. 6 of those are publicly owned. Hopefully I get these numbers right. 6 are owned by the city of, maintained by the city of Fayetteville, and 4 by PWC. And that just gives you an idea of the vastness of the opportunity here. We've covered that. So the agenda for this meeting, give you that real quickly, is to go over the dam policy that was recently adopted by the City Council, to talk about how that applies to your specific dam. We'll talk about funding options that may be available to you all. We'll talk about the process for one of those funding options in particular, what's called a special assessment. We'll also talk about process and schedule for design and construction of improvements, and then next steps moving forward after this evening's meeting. And then at the end, it'll be the question and answer. As was mentioned earlier, you all should have received a card or cards to write your questions down on. The reason that's being done is this meeting is being recorded. So for those that can't join us this evening, they can watch it on the city's website at their leisure. I think it'll be posted sometime tomorrow at fayetteville.nc.gov. So that's the reason that we're trying to structure everything so the camera and the one microphone, so that those of us that can't join us this evening can participate through the internet. As you have your questions written down, if you just want to raise your hand, someone will come by and collect it. If you need another card, because you can ask more than one question, raise your hand, someone will bring you another card. So just do that throughout the meeting, and they'll continue to feed us the questions as we get to that point in this evening's meeting. So let's talk a little bit about the policy that the City Council adopted, I believe, in April of this year. And the part that's relevant to Arran Lakes is the portion that's for privately owned dams that support a city street that's running on the dam facility itself. What triggers the city's involvement under this policy is, number one, what the title says. It's privately owned dam or privately maintained dam, but it supports a city street on it. If there is a declared state of emergency or declared disaster declaration, it triggers this policy. And that's declared presumably by the state of North Carolina and the federal government. The other key part on this slide is that the repairs that are needed are not covered by any other federal assistance or state assistance, but may be financed through a special assessment that's managed by the city of Fayetteville. The second part of the policy that triggers the city's participation is if the Dam Safety Board, which is a part of the Department of Environmental Quality for the state of North Carolina, they have what's called the Dam Safety Board. You may have gotten a letter from them, your homeowners association, about the status of your dam. But if the Dam Safety Board determines that major repairs are needed, then the city can contribute up to 110% of the expense to preserve the structural integrity of the street, so that the city street that the city maintains can continue to serve the public, and that the remaining cost for the project may be funded by special assessment, which we'll talk more about special assessment here in just a moment. So what that really does under this policy is leaves those developments that have a privately maintained dam with a city street on it, two options to repair the dam and restore the lake to be able to impound water. One is to pay for the improvements yourself, self-fund it by whatever means you're able to muster and figure out. Or the other is to work with the city through this special assessment process that we're here to discuss this evening. And so what is a special assessment? We're going to talk more specifically, but at a very high level, it's essentially where the city will fund the improvements up front to restore the dam. And then those benefited property owners pay the city back over time for those costs. So let's focus on how that process works here going forward. So the very first step is, within the coming days, your homeowners association representatives will receive a letter from the city of Fayetteville that has a sample petition. This is a non-binding petition. What the city is trying to find out, of all the dams that may have been damaged, privately maintained dams across the city that may have been damaged by Hurricane Matthew, which homeowners association, which neighborhoods want to consider participating with the city through the special assessment process. It's not binding. This initial petition is not binding. They just want to see who's interested. So within the next few days, your HOA representatives will receive a letter with a copy of this petition from the city for you all to consider. You have until, you can see at the bottom, until August 31st to submit that petition. Again, it's non-binding. The city wants to get all these back in from all the private dam owners to see how many may be interested. Why do they want to do that? They want to get a scope of what the financial commitment might be here. Are we talking about 2 dams, 4 dams, 8 dams? We don't know yet. And that's what they're trying to get a handle on. And the next step is, beginning in September during the month of September and October, that's what the city will spend its time, is reviewing these petitions, seeing what the scope of the effort might be, what the financing options may be to proceed to help you all with, or you and the others, with restoring your dam through the special assessment process. Once those decisions are made, part of the scope of work that the city has retained Freese & Nichols for is to come in and perform an engineering evaluation of the dams that might be participating in this special assessment process. So what does that mean? We'll come in and look at, from a technical perspective, what may be required to bring that dam back up to a minimum level that the Dam Safety Board is happy with. That includes coming up with what it might cost to do that. So then we can begin to look at all those and add all those up for all the dams that we are assessing or evaluating for the city, and then come back and help the city determine what the special assessments may be applied across the city and what those total costs are going to be for the community. Then we'll come back and meet with those communities that did petition and have another meeting to tell them, here's what the evaluation determined, here's what the cost estimate is to improve that dam, to bring it back to standard, and here's who are the benefited properties. It's hard to determine today who the benefited properties are. Is it just those that own property adjacent to the impoundment? Is it everyone in the neighborhood? Is it those in the watershed upstream, downstream? All those questions have to be looked at. That's part of the evaluation. So we can't tell you tonight it's going to be X number of property owners in any given neighborhood until we do those specific evaluations. But at this point in the process, we'll be able to, after we have done those evaluations, we'll be able to have those meetings and sit down with each neighborhood individually and let you know what those costs might be and how many property owners are affected by those costs. And that's what this part is, to determine the benefited properties for the special assessment. Then after that point, the homeowners association or the property owners that are benefiting by these improvements are at another decision point. Do you all want to file a formal petition asking the city to proceed with creating a special assessment to improve your dam, which essentially is going out and borrowing the money to finance the improvements and repair your dam and restore it? And then the affected property owners pay it back to the city over time. You'll have 30 days to submit that second petition, and the way the petition is drafted now, we're looking for at least 60% of the affected property owners to want to participate in that process. And then once all those petitions are submitted, then the city council sits down and looks at them as a whole and determines again, to finalize what the financing plans are going to be and moving forward with the special assessments. So that's coming to the decision of the city assisting the property owners of these privately owned dams or privately maintained dams to get them restored to help to impound water again sometime in the future. Once we get to that point, it's time to begin designing the improvements and constructing those improvements. And city governments in North Carolina and most other states have to go through certain processes to procure design professionals, to hire contractors. So it's not just like if you have an improvement you want to do at your home and you can go hire a contractor that maybe your neighbor recommended and you got a couple of references on, you agree on a price and you do it. They have to go through a very formal process. And that takes a while to do. As you can see up there, it takes 3 to 4 months to get through the process of issuing what's called a request for qualifications, or RFQ, evaluating those qualifications from qualified engineering firms, selecting the most qualified firm to do these projects, or maybe multiple firms, and then negotiating the contract and fee with that particular firm. And then they get into the period of design. And again, that's going to vary depending upon the amount of damage done and the conditions, soil conditions and other things, the size of the watershed. So we're estimating 4 to 6 months to get those improvements completed. That includes designing the improvements, getting the permits, and getting the bid documents ready so the city can take it to construction. There are at least 4 different agencies, state and federal, that we have to get permits from for these improvements. That's the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality for water quality purposes, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for environmental purposes, FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, for floodplain purposes, and then the Department of Environmental Quality Dam Safety for the structural integrity of the dam. So there's 4 different agencies at least that we have to coordinate with and get permits from to get these dams restored. Once we get permits, bid documents, and the city has to go back through a similar process as they did for selecting the design consultant. It's selecting a contractor, advertising and taking bids, sealed bids for these improvements, selecting the most qualified responsible bidder for the contract to make the repairs, and then again, depending upon the scope of the work that's needed, anywhere from 4 to 12 months to get through that process. So it's almost a 2-year process to get through from design to completion. Could be less, but hopefully that's going to be the outside amount of time to get through that process. So the next steps. Mentioned earlier, this Homeowners Association petition, what I call the preliminary petition, will be sent out in the next few days to the representatives of the Homeowners Association. It's all they're saying is that you want to be considered in the city, considering the special assessment process for improvements to your dam. They have to be submitted to the city by August 31st. And then once they're all taken in, the city will step back and look at all those, work with the city council, get an idea of what the scope is going to be from a cost perspective and a time frame, and then we begin the process of making those decisions moving forward. That will happen by November of this year on which dams want to have a special assessment considered and starting that process of the technical evaluation. So that's kind of the next steps. So we're at the part for the question and answers for the meeting this evening. Again, we'll remind you this meeting is being recorded. That's why we're taking the questions in writing. I will read the questions, and someone either from our office, this is David Webb with Friesen Nichols, or Rob Stone with the Department of Public Services, City of Fayetteville. I'll direct the question to the appropriate person to answer, and we'll do our best to give you an answer for these questions. So again, if you have a card that you need to have picked up, raise your hand, someone will come get it. If you need another card, raise your hand, someone will bring you one. So with that, we'll start the questions.
Start with an easy one.
And I'm judging handwriting too, by the way. This is you got to beat the Thursday night crowd from last week. They had the best handwriting last week. Is there a hard copy or electronic copy of this presentation available? And I believe the city will have it up on their website tomorrow if it's not already up there. So it will be available at fayetteville.nc.gov starting tomorrow. I shouldn't have I'm not supposed to be answering questions. I'm sorry. Next question. Will all of the homes in the Aron Lakes pay for the dam repair, or just the lakefront homes? Rob or Doug?
It will be both of us. Rob, come on up. One of the things they're talking about the special assessment is that the special assessment, if we move forward with it, would be not for an amenity lake. It would actually be for a stormwater facility. And a stormwater facility looks a little bit different, costs a little bit different than what you might consider an amenity lake. And because of that, because it would be a stormwater facility drainage lake to help us with the flow of water from surrounding areas, part of the assessment that we would do would be looking at those property owners who would directly benefit from that. And if I need to stand in front of the microphone, I will. And so there are portions of Rayconda that the property may not drain at all towards the lake at Rayconda, which was breached. And so one of the things that we would have to do in order to be able to identify who would be assessed would be trying to assess which homeowners would be benefited, property owners would benefit from the repair of that dam. And so that would be something that we would do in some of the initial stages as well. Rob, anything that? Before we go on to the next question, I did want to recognize Mayor Pro Tem Mitch Colvin's here, Mayor Nat Robertson's there, and Councilmember Jim Arp is in the back as well. And Senator Ben Clark. Hey, thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Hey, Charles. How you doing, sir? Former council member Charles Evans and Kirk Deviere in the corner as well. Thank you. Thank you as well. Everybody's all over. I can't see everybody. Next question, Charles.
Are any of the dam owners responsible for restitution of homes lost to the flood? Rob, you want?
I'm not an attorney, and I won't play one here either, but I would just say that issues about restitution or issues like that, particularly for those who were flooded or who were downstream of the lakes and the dams which were breached, or some of them which are already in distress, that is probably a legal question that you need to consult an attorney about. But I can tell you that the state of North Carolina is taking a much more aggressive regulatory stance to making sure that dams which are in distress or are not maintained are either brought up to standard or that they are breached. They've done that in the past at several beautiful lakes that we have in our community. Roses Lake was one that before Hurricane Matthew, we had a community come out quite often and talk to the council about re-impounding that lake and reestablishing that dam. But that was something that was breached by the state more than a decade ago because of concerns about the safety and maintenance of the dam, particularly those who are downstream. But as it relates to anyone who feels that they were negatively impacted because of the maintenance of a dam or other facility by private individuals, probably should consult an attorney about that.
Next question is, how will the city address public health issues regarding mosquitoes harbored by the swamp created by the dam breach? Rob?
Unfortunately, when the dam breached, especially the private dams we were talking about, they're actually on private property, so that's not city-maintained property. So the city has no plans to try to address any of the impoundment or anything that was left behind. What happens afterward is really just natural flow of the water, and what happened, basically the area that was impounded it reverts back to its natural state.
So even if the Homeowners Association files a petition for the evaluation of their dam, can the city council vote not to fund it? And if so, does it die there?
The answer is that the council does have the authority to order the assessment or not order the assessment. And what would happen, the actual statutory process would be that there would be a public hearing. There would be a series of public hearings before the actual assessment roll was read. One of the reasons, and I took a peek at some of the questions, one of the questions dealt with why the 60% threshold that was described, or why even have a public hearing, is because the city council really wants to hear from the homeowners. They don't want a small group of homeowners who may directly benefit from the re-impoundment of the lake or repair of the dam to necessarily be able to commit the resources of all of the property owners in the neighborhood to fixing it. But conversely as well, the council wants to hear from you, all of you, whether you're in favor or not. And so if there comes a case, if we do an initial assessment of one of these dams, and it comes back and the assessment would be, I'm going to give you a crazy number so no one fall out, let's say $50 million, then would you want the city council to move forward knowing that you and your neighbors would be the ones to pay for it? And so there is some stopgap in that where the council members are able to either order the assessment because they feel it has benefit, or if they feel it may have benefit but it may be cost prohibitive for the property owners, the council also has the ability to also not order that assessment. Hopefully that answered that question.
The Corps of Engineers deemed the empty lakes or lake beds wetlands after 2 years. If the Homeowners Association choose to have the city assess their dam, does the 2 years start from the date of the destruction or the date of the city's assessment? David, you want to take that?
So with regard to the wetlands, what we would do during the initial engineering evaluation is also have an initial environmental evaluation. We'd have environmental scientists go out and do a jurisdictional determination to verify that if indeed those are wetlands. If they are, the Army Corps has to come out and sign off on that. And from the date of the jurisdictional determination, it begins the 2 years. If there's already been a JD done on that, then the 2 years may already be in process, but it doesn't mean you can't have the lake restored. It means you have to pay mitigation fees. So that amount of the mitigation would have to be rolled into the cost of the dam.
All right. The 60% required for the special assessment was not a number expressed at last week's dam meeting. When did this become a hard number? If it's okay, I'll answer that. There are two different petitions. One is that preliminary petition that's due by August 31st. That's from the Homeowners Association stating an interest in having the evaluation conducted. After the evaluation is conducted and the city wants to proceed with considering a special assessment, that goes back to the point that was just made by Mr. Hewitt of getting a supermajority of the property owners that are benefited by the special assessment supportive of it, because by that point in time you're going to know how much it's going to cost, who has to pay, and what it's going to cost you over X number of years for the years to come. So that's why the 60% came out in the policy or the process last week. And that'll be in the petition information that goes out to the Homeowners Association in the next few days. Next question. It's somewhat related. Who came up with the initial 30 days to get the petition for the evaluation? That was a process that was agreed upon by the city and Freeze and Nichols as we were working on this timeline to get through this project and this process. It's already been since October of last year. A lot of work's been done. There's still a lot to be done, but wanted to give the property owners enough time to get yourself organized, give everybody that you need to talk to give you the thumbs up to move forward, but not do it too quickly, but also not drag it out too long either. So trying to get it done within the next month seemed to be the best solution. Why are Aron lakes considered private? We're in the city limits. We were annexed. Rob?
Even though there was a public road on top, what FEMA definition is that the city has been maintaining the dam itself, and that's something that the city has not maintained the dam, and that's where it comes in private. There is no mechanism for the city to maintain the dam. There has never been any work done by the city on the dam other than the road itself.
What discussions, if any, have been about the devaluation of property and loss of tax dollars?
The city council in their deliberations, and what I failed to mention is that we went back and looked, and for the months of, I know, January, February, March, and April, when the council actually changed the policy, The council had discussions about the dam policy almost continually. One of the considerations that the council, one of the considerations in front of council was what happens to the value, not only of the neighborhood identity, but also the investment that you've made in your homes and the devaluation as well. And that is also one of the reasons that the staff and the council worked so very hard to try to identify a way in which we feel that we could help. But ultimately, the North Carolina general statutes don't allow that to be one of the considerations about the devaluation of not having a lake view or having a home that abuts a lake or having a lake in the middle of a subdivision. It's not one of the things which allows us to use public resources to repair. We tried it, we looked at it, we asked a question. We asked it not only locally, we asked it at the state level, but we also asked our bond council as well. But it's because the council is concerned not just about property values, but also about the community identity. When you tell people where you live, sir, where do you live? You live in Arran Lakes. Freddie, when you tell folks where you live in Ray Conde, and everybody who knows that knows about the beautiful lake that was there. And we have another meeting tonight at 7:30 as well, and it'll be a similar sentiment about Loch Lomond. But sadly, again, the value or devaluation that may occur because their lake is no longer there was not something for which we're able to use public funds and resources. But we do believe that the process we have is one that, within reason, will allow us to assist in bringing back those lakes in the repair of those dams.
This is a little bit of a follow-up, just that last part.
Explain the math on the city and homeowners association costs. Do you want me to handle it from here? Okay, sure. It's on the way this policy is written for, remember this is for a privately maintained dam that has a city street on it. So the city will pay the cost up to 110% of repairing that street. So the structural integrity of the street is maintained for safe traffic. And then the remaining cost will be borne, if it proceeds with restoring the dam, including the emergency spillway, by the property owners benefiting from those improvements. And that would be funded by the special assessment if you choose to go through this process. So that's kind of at a high level. We don't know the math numbers until we see what the numbers are from the engineering and environmental evaluation of that particular project. If it's a, next question, moving on, if it's a stormwater retention dam, is that not a city necessary infrastructure? Based on developments upstream, why would homeowners have to pay for that? Rob?
The difference between a stormwater retention device and a amenity lake, Arran Lakes was built as an amenity lake to enhance the development that was there, to provide a place, an amenity for that community. A stormwater control device looks a lot different than just an amenity lake. A stormwater control device will move up and down depending on the weather and how much water you're looking at and what you're needing to collect. So a lot of times it may be up at a certain level, and then a lot of times it may be down. So that's the difference between it. And the city did not build Arran Lakes. It was done to enhance the community as the development was built for the housing development. So if we move forward with the assessment, the lake would look a little different as a stormwater retention facility as opposed to just an amenity lake. It would be a difference there.
If the private dams are private assets and maintained by the Homeowners Association, why are there fines from DEQ if we do not slope the breach and add grass? The water flow is not impeded at this point and is flowing freely in its natural state. Dave?
That's definitely a policy question for NCDEQ and dam safety. Really, I would say, somebody with the city or DEQ would have to look at exactly what the situation was and help to better answer that question, but that's definitely a DEQ issue.
How do you define whether a property is in Arran Lakes? Some of the properties are in Arran Lakes neighborhood, but are defined as Shenandoah on the tax records. I think that gets back to when it comes down to a special assessment being applied to Arran Lakes or any other one. We'll go through a process of who are the benefited properties. So it may be in Arran Lakes, it may be from a neighboring development. We just don't know yet. That's why I have to get into that detail after the preliminary petitions are submitted and then approved by the council to move forward to see who the affected property owners might be that would be included in a potential special assessment role. Is a special assessment a dollar-for-dollar repayment, or does it have an interest rate for repayment?
The special assessments, as I understand, could be stretched up to 10 years and could have an interest rate up to 8%, but it is something that would be set by the city council at that time. There is a cost to borrowing the money and for maintaining the assessments, and that would be something that the council would likely choose to cover. But as this is not something that's meant to, during any of the council discussions thus far, to be a moneymaker, I'm sure that the council would direct staff to make sure that the rate, the assessment, and the terms were as favorable as could be to make sure that the cost of the improvements were covered.
Okay. Are there any other cards out there for questions related to Arran Lake? All right, got a couple coming over here. Over here. Okay. If you submitted a question that was not related directly to the Arran Lakes Dam breach and its restoration, you'll get a direct follow-up from the city trying to answer your question as best they can, whatever that might have been. We had some that were related to a lot of different other topics. Next question, with a successful effort to restore a private dam and assessments are accepted by the Homeowners Association, does the Homeowners Association retain ownership of the lake? Very good question.
Yes. The actual maintenance would then convert to the city again, because there would be a requirement to have a public benefit to or a public piece of that once public funds were put into the repairs, and the maintenance would be handled by the city. However, the actual ownership of the dam would still maintain to the community, to the HOA.
If an amenity lake is used daily by the storm drains that the city maintains and is causing destructive erosion to our backyards, why doesn't the city remove them to help their residents retain the property they pay for with the hard-earned money?
Again, when you look at a private amenity lake, the city has no way of going into a private facility and doing any repairs. It'd be any different than if you had a driveway that was damaged. The city cannot go on private property and do any repairs. It's back to the same mechanism. There's no mechanism to spend public funds on private property.
Why is the state not footing the cost for Arran Lake since they approved the additional stormwater to enter the lake?
So by the state, I would say that you may be referring to NCDOT, Rayford Road, and some of those roadways. Also, any upstream property that went through the development review process with the city, all of those things go through a process that after a certain point in time, there are stormwater detention requirements that had to be met. Any of the upstream development that was falling under those requirements had to go through a process to become approved by the city. NCDOT, when they do roadway improvements, they also have to follow specific guidelines to ensure that they're not dumping more water on people downstream. So there are cases where developments were done prior to these rules going into place, and ultimately there are certain laws in place that require you to accept upstream water onto your property if it's being used for a reasonable use. I think Rob may be able to add some more to the actual stormwater policy.
As David mentioned, the City Council stormwater ordinance requires, as a development comes into place now, that they have to maintain a certain amount of stormwater on property. So it's back to that. We know that there is, as a development comes in, you put more area that it runs water off. The requirements are that that development has to hold that water in a certain amount of time before it can release it out. So that is what the City Council policy does now.
Except for natural rainfall that flowed into Arran Lake, why should Arran Lake have to accept all of the runoff due to developers along Bingham and Rayford roads? It's a very similar question that we've just answered. Anything to add to what was just said? Do Arran Lakes have a homeowners association, and who is a member? Raise your hand if you're a member.
Arran Lakes Homeowners Association.
Arran Lakes Homeowners Association.
And the
So
president is?
I think that answers the question. If we own multiple properties, do we get one vote per property address, or we only get one per person towards the 60%?
The assessment would be per property that you own that would benefit. And I guess for ownership purposes, I would assume that the number of properties individually that would be assessed that would benefit would potentially have a say. But that is something that we will follow up on with legal counsel, and if the answer is something different than that, we'll report that out as well. We'll share that with the homeowners associations.
To be clear, the city maintains the storm drains and has the right-of-way on our properties to maintain these storm drains. So why do they not have the right-of-way to remove these destructive drains and divert the waters to a non-amenity stormwater allocated lake? Rob, you want to take that shot at that?
Again, when the development was created, there was certain levels that the development put in structures to move the stormwater away from, so it does not harm the properties that are there. As when the city maintains those streets and the actual stormwater infrastructure that's moving that water, if you try to take that out, what happens is you start affecting your neighbors. And not only is that illegal, but it's also a way of having a civil lawsuit against you for removing the proper movement of the water. Again, what David had mentioned previously is there's certain laws in effect that basically that you have to accept certain waters downstream. There's no way to prevent that from happening. So.
Any more questions? Any more questions out there? Okay, waiting on one here.
First of all, I would like to say good evening to all of you. If the city council approves,
Ma'am, we can't hear you, so if you could just submit the question, we'll be happy to read it.
bring it down.
Well, finish writing. Take your time.
Okay, you want me to write it down and ask later?
Write it down, and she'll bring it up to us. Any more questions being worked on out there in the very back? Okay, thank you.
Just a comment for people who couldn't be here tonight, /be on the city
Yes. Yes, sir. Thank you. The video will be on the city's website as well as the slideshow that you saw this evening. It'll be available tomorrow at FayettevillenC.gov. There's the meetings we did last week and the meetings tonight. We've got one more after this for the Raconda neighborhood. But they'll all be up on the city's website tomorrow. Will the city ask property owners if they want to pay any special assessment to fix the dams, or will the city be asking the development homeowners associations? The reason for the question: in the mid-1990s, our homeowners association accepted the private lakes in Raconda without asking the property owners. Many of us did not want the dams, lakes, liabilities that come with them. Let me suggest we hold this. The next meeting is about Raconda, and this one is about Arran Lake, so we'll get to that in just a few minutes. There's an impact of runoff from Bingham Drive to the private homes. I think the gist of the question is that there's an impact from Bingham Drive flooding downstream to the private homes downstream of Bingham Drive.
I think we've already addressed as far as the board. This is very similar to the past questions we've had. When the water is coming down, already in effect that there are processes to try to keep the runoff at the location so it is held and then put out at a timely manner so it doesn't flood. As we know in the past, we're dealing with a lot more area in the city of Fayetteville. Plus, we're coming out of a drought season. If you remember, if you've been here since the 80s, we were coming out of a drought. The water table now is higher than it has been in a long time, so that exacerbates some of the problems we're seeing. Bingham Drive is actually a state-maintained roadway, and as the water flows down again, as we've seen in the past, that what we're trying to do with up in the upper development is to any new development that comes in and any that's been in place since the ordinance has been in place would hold that water and let it out at a reasonable time. If the city council approves a loan, how will the cost be assessed to the homeowners?
Well, there are different ways in which the statute speaks to how homeowners or property owners could be assessed. It really depends on the type of assessment. For whether it's water and sewer, sidewalk, it can be by the frontage abutting the project. It can be by the land area served by the project. It could be by the number of lots served by the project or any variation thereof. But what the statute speaks to is whatever method is used, all of the property owners would be assessed in the same manner. And so if it is by road frontage, which it would not be for this project, then all of the homeowners, if you had 50 feet frontage, someone else has 75, it would be by linear foot. But for this, I would anticipate it would likely be by lot. But we would understand that better once we get through the preliminary assessment.
Any further questions? Any further questions? All right. Again, thank you all. Will somebody field the questions on the actual YouTube video? I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions. Will somebody from the city field any additional questions on the video that's posted?
Are you speaking about the questions that were not directly related to the Arran Lakes?
No, he asked if there's any more questions. There's a lot of people that couldn't make it, so I'm interested if the video that's posted tonight
Right.
is online, if somebody from the city can field additional questions.
Oh, absolutely, and we will be able to provide you with the link as well. We'll give an email address if we don't already have one established. It'd probably be our project manager, maybe Mr. Larch or John Larch, who's in the back. Yeah. Yes, so the answer to the question is yes.
Sir, we're trying not to take verbal questions, and we're going to get the Ray Conda here in just at 7:30. I'm not sure exactly what time it is. But to repeat your question, that after folks watch the video online and they have a question that may not have been asked and answered during the video, they can submit it by email to the city, and it will be responded to for everyone to take a look at. So again, thank you for your interest this evening. This video and the slides will be posted on the website tomorrow at FayettevilleNC.gov. And again, the key thing is if you are interested in the petition, the preliminary petition, please submit it to your to the city council, to the city by August 31st. So again, thank you. We appreciate you all coming out tonight, and drive safe going home.